Hey, this is Michael with Parsimony, and today I want to talk about DPO, Document, Process, and Operationalize. It's an interesting grouping of words, but what we're really saying here is one of the founding principles of Parsimony, which is you need to build systems if you want to scale your business. And I think everybody will agree to that, but obviously there's a lot of nitty-gritty that matters here. So we want to walk you through what we mean by DPO. It starts with document, and that means really put it in writing. Let your organization know this is our procedure. This is our SOP. This is how we do it, and we do it this way every time, right? So for example, how do you do month-end receivables? How do you reconcile the bank account? How do you do check runs? I'm going to use a lot of accounting examples here just to sort of keep things in a convenient theme for everyone to help you learn. But you get the idea that this could also apply to how do you bring new products to market? How do you receive inventory? How do you conduct sales presentations? There are SOPs for nearly every aspect of your business, and putting those in writing so that everybody knows what the best way to do it is, what the most efficient way, what the safest way is, having all of that written down is key. Part of putting it in writing, we believe, includes putting in a description. This is what this SOP is for. Sometimes titles can be confusing. It's helpful to have a clear description about what this SOP covers. And we also believe in including some background. People like to know the why they're doing something or what the context of this SOP is. If you just tell them do something and they don't understand the why, there can be reluctance. But if you include that and make it available to them, then they can fit it together in their head and they get this understanding and you get their buy-in, and there's less reluctance to sort of falling into this very ordered and measured way of doing things. So understanding the background of how this SOP fits into the business is really, really helpful to getting these SOPs used by the business. We also like a little section that we call reference. Who wrote it? When did they write it? Maybe this SOP is really old and the world has changed. Maybe this SOP has dependencies, either upstream or downstream, right? That it requires that something else be done. Or maybe it needs to understand that others depend on it. So just a few notes to make sure that the details on this SOP can be very helpful. And then, of course, the SOP's meat and potatoes is the steps. They should be clear, specific, and brief. So don't try to write, how to bring a new product to market or how to close the monthly financials in just 3 steps, right? Those should be lots of steps to go through and do those things. So each one should be very clear, very specific. Keep it as brief as you can because you want to have these people understand, what they're trying to do. They should be properly ordered. Don't make somebody jump around. They should be able to go very clearly from step 1 to step 2, from step 2 to step 3. They can be nested. So for instance, if step 1 is to perhaps meet a new employee and step 2 is to give them their username and password, it's okay to link something to step 2 that says, if you don't have their username and password, here's the SOP on how to get them their username and password. So it's okay to nest a separate one. Then they should be what we call discrete but complete. And by that, we mean don't feel that you need to wrap up an SOP in 5 steps or 10 steps. We've seen lots of SOPs with 20 steps and more because there's a clear order to it and you have to do all these things to get this done. And that's just what it took to do it. So don't feel that you have to limit yourself to the number of steps. On the other hand, rule 1 here was be very specific, right? So don't try to bite off too much either. You can probably break up 50-step SOP can probably be broken up into a few that could be put together. So that's document. And again, the key idea is put it in writing, put it in context, make the steps very clear that everybody can understand. Once you've done that, then you've got an SOP, but you don't really have a process, right? Because the process is a series of SOPs that are done in concert to complete a task. Let me give you an example. The month-end financial closing involves scrubbing or reconciling pretty much the entire chart of accounts, right? the assets, the liabilities, the owner's equity, everything, revenue and expenses. So as you go through, at the top of the chart of accounts is, what are the amounts that are in the different bank accounts? You need to confirm that. You need to confirm the inventory. There should be an SOP on how to do that. You need to check that invoices have been collected and bills have been paid. There should be SOPs for each of those. So you can see right here, we've got 3, 4, 5 SOPs at a minimum to just do those few steps. So the process then is building a checklist of the SOPs that need to be completed to close out the month-end financials. That's what we mean by the process. It's having that checklist of SOPs that are done in concert. So as they go through all those steps and get them completed, you also want to make sure that they're done in the right order. So for example, make sure that all the checks have been deposited before reporting the bank balance. So if you've got different SOPs, let's make sure that the checklist has them listed in the correct order so that we can go through them one time in the right way and get the right outcome. Then checklists are also helpful for urgent or rarely occurring tasks. So imagine a couple of times in my career, I've been there and there's been an angry employee that is, suddenly leaving the company. And there's this scramble that says, whoa, can you believe that Mary's no longer here? What do we do? Well, you should have a checklist for those kinds of situations, right? You should change the key code maybe at the door. You should change their password. You should disable their email account or route it to their manager. There should be a series of SOPs that are in a checklist that said, when an employee leaves, here are the things that you do. Similarly, something like year-end financials happen only once a year, right? At year end. It can be hard to remember every step. There are things when you're closing financials that happen only at year end. They don't happen quarterly. They don't happen monthly. They certainly don't happen daily. They only happen at year end. So what are those things? You don't want to forget them. You don't do it that often, right? Somebody that has been at a company for 20 years has only done year-end financials 20 times. Okay, and that was spread out over 20 years. So making sure that all these steps get followed, that you don't miss something, is going to save you a lot of time and trouble and money down the road. All right, so there's our document, there's our process. What do we mean by operationalize? Well, it's pretty simple. It comes down to accountability. Who is responsible for that process or task? When does it need to be completed by? You can see nowhere in this process and document steps have we said anything about that, right? So the SOP just says, this is how you do it. The process says, this is in what order you do these things or what things cause these to need to be done. But when does it need to be completed by? Are there others that are dependent on this process? How do we measure and manage to make sure that this work is getting done? And what happens if something is missing or overdue? This is management. This is making sure that the business is actually getting done. You can't just have stuff in the binder and expect it to get done. Another key part of this is the availability. These SOPs and checklists should be readily accessible. You don't want them sitting, across the room or in another building or lost in a file folder or stuck on a server somewhere where people can't get at them. You really need to make this stuff clearly available. We've seen people that have clipboards that are on the wall. We've seen big, thick, 4-inch, 5-inch binders full of SOPs that nobody ever uses because it's too hard to, get the folder, drop it on your desk, and then start paging through trying to find the SOP that you need. Lastly, you want some efficiency. All of the processes should be documented, but many of them can be learned or even mastered by the people that do them. So at that point, you don't want the SOP to get in the way. They should have access to them if they need them, but they should fade to the background if they've mastered it. So you don't want the system to be more work than the actual work, right? If they know how to process the daily invoices and they've got the SOP to do it, let them do it. And then they should just be able to go to the checklist and say, I process the daily invoices. On the other hand, if you've got a new hire and they don't know, they should be able to very quickly access the procedure that they need to do and be able to accomplish it.